And so today we're going to be talking about, or in this session, we've got about 20 minutes or so, and we've heard some context, and what we'll be talking about is the recruiting revolution. In particular, are there some novel approaches? As Gillian pointed out, and as we all know, that there's some big issues in the tech industry. There's a big skills gap, way more jobs than people, and there's also a diversity issue. The people working in tech, which are these high-paid, skilled, aspirational jobs of the future, often aren't very representative of society. So could we adopt some novel approaches outside of the kind of status quo to do something about that? And I'm delighted to be joined by a fantastic panel. So we have Nick Adams, starting there. Nick is VP he's Vice President of GP Partners. GP Partners helps you recruit anyone, anywhere, anytime.
Well done, Ash.
And that's very important when we think about the global context. Delighted also to be joined by Dr. Maureen Dunn, expert in diversity, but in particular neurodiversity, a career spanning over 2 decades focused on this issue. Dr. Maureen is a senior advisor at the Lego Foundation and has been a social impact investor with Autism Angels and other very important institutions. And delighted also to be joined by Charlotte Ibbotson. And Charlotte is our expert in early careers, headed up early careers at BT, and now does this as Director of Talent for Wiley Edge, and in particular with a real passion and focus on how do we open up tech careers to non-degree holders, to people who might not ordinarily get the opportunity. I guess I'll start with you, Charlotte. And if you don't mind sharing with us in more detail what you think the benefits are of hiring a broader workforce, maybe workers from all backgrounds and skill levels.
I think, I'm not going to bore everybody, I think we all know that we should be hiring a more diverse set of people. I think for me the focus point is what we do with said people already in the organisation to change their attitude of why it's important. So you can hire these people, but if they don't feel included, then what's the point? And I think I saw a study from the Boston Consulting Group that was around if men are more advocates and kind of allies in this space, particularly for women and in any inclusion, diversity initiatives, productivity and profitability goes through the roof. So why are we not focusing more on those kind of things in-house rather than just saying, yes, let's fill quota by, putting a kind of ring fence around, we need to do 20% hiring in this realm of demographic because of X, Y, Z.
And, I mean, have you seen any particular examples that you've worked on closer to home?
Yeah, so we've just recently, in the last year, we've done a Women in Tech program at Wiley Edge. So we're training those that have a degree in anything, and we're taking them on board to train them in effectively software development, Java, all of that coding, and by the end we'd be placing them into our clients. And the company it was driven actually by a man, this initiative. Somebody in my team actually came forward and said, why we're not just doing, we can see that computer science grads in the market are about 18%. So why would we not just stop the criteria of you can only be a computer science grad to go into a tech career? And it kind of just grew from there. And then we're on our 3rd Women in Tech program in the last 18 months. And just seeing the change and kind of focus on this from everybody in the company has been really brilliant to see.
Yeah, and that's something I can speak to personally as well. In all of the introductions, I forgot to introduce myself. So I'm Ashley. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Academy.tech. We're an education startup, and we help large companies and startups kind of create new pathways into technology for people from underrepresented groups, working with companies like Ocado and International Airlines Group through to unicorns like Beamery. And we often see that companies are very focused on hiring I guess, two buckets of people. Those with industry experience already, so maybe an engineer with several years of work experience, or potentially those from quite a narrow set of academic credentials, computer science graduates or STEM graduates. And that kind of locks out a lot of society. It's a sort of filtering out mechanism, and we discovered if you can filter people in, is it possible to screen people in based on their potential rather than screen out on the kind of attributes they don't have? It makes a huge difference. And kind of wanted to bring you into the conversation, Maureen, on your experiences and your observations on, you know, neurodiversity in particular. Lots of companies don't really know what to do here. And we know that there's an extraordinary pool of people who could bring real advantages to these companies, but how can they become more confident in approaching this space?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because I know we've talked a little bit too about even like remote work, and I know there's some overlap with just a lot of the engineers and CTOs, especially that we place in companies, and there's, you know, a huge competitive advantage to being more flexible, because some of the best talent, especially like in AI and in technology and engineering, like there's companies losing that talent because they're not willing to be more flexible. They're not willing to, you know, consider a remote or hybrid type of scenario. And so I've seen that, and not all those engineers are neurodivergent, but some are. So there's some overlap there. But I'd also just say that I think in general that there, especially like when we look ahead to where things are going in the future, with the future of work, the economic climate, you know, at least in the US, we have a major structural labor shortage that's not going to be going away anytime soon. There's 4 million job openings that employers are struggling to find positions than there were years ago. And there's so much talent that's been untapped, I think, especially with neurodivergent workers that bring unique perspectives, bring different types of cognitive perceptual skills. And I think that the big thing is, you know, it's worth investing in that direction and having more flexible policies, because otherwise your competitors are going to take advantage of this unique talent.
Mm-hmm. Fair point, really interesting. I mean, untapped talent really is a good way of encapsulating that. And of course, in the last few years, I mean, we had COVID. That was, I guess, a big shock, but then also a big opportunity in terms of the future of work. And Nick, you've been working on the front line of this, this issue of a global workforce, a remote workforce, untapped talent. What have you seen the best companies do in accessing a pool of talent that they, you know, have previously been unable to?
So I think just to go back to, I want to comment on the question you asked before, and then I'll answer this one. There are a lot of different pools of great talent out there that you can access, and the world has certainly moved on where remote work is embraced, and I think, yeah, the power is with the people, I would say. In as much as if you have good talent and they get the opportunity to choose where they work, they will probably go for a better work-life balance. So I do think remote work is here to stay. That's number one. Not for all roles, admittedly, but for a lot. There are great talent pools. If you forget borders, then we call it the democratization of opportunity. So in other words, you know, you can hire great talent anywhere in the world. And you know, if you look at working parents, if you look at people that are geographically in inaccessible places, but they still have access to technology. And what we're seeing is some amazing places, which wouldn't spring to mind, such as Nigeria. It's one of the best places right now anywhere for accessing front-end and back-end developers, for example. Slightly off-piece, but you know, it's a really interesting area, the accessibility to great talent. If you give people a chance who they wouldn't normally get a chance, or that most employees wouldn't look at them, you tend to find they're better leaders, and you tend to find that you get lower attrition with them as well. So I'd recommend that. Going back to your question to me, I think if you are going to take advantage of a global talent pool, you really need to decide, first of all, you know, is it to open a new market? Is it for a back-end call center type or help desk? And then depending on that, you can have a look at the markets available. But again, I've mentioned example Nigeria, there's Mexico, there's Poland, there's so many great places in the world where there's good talent. So once you've identified that, you have to be able to get into market very quickly. What we do at GP is, we're traditionally known for employer of record, which is where we can hire workers into our entities. So rather than a 2 or a 3 year wait to set up a business, you can do it overnight and have people employed compliantly and paid in the local currency. You have to be very careful if you are going to hire people globally, because first of all, you do need to make sure you have a policy around what is the expectation of those workers. As we work more what we call asynchronously, different time zones, different languages, it really becomes about being able to ensure that you can measure performance of individuals, that you can be culturally appropriate, that you can be compliant in how you employ them, and how you pay them as well. So there's a lot to look at there. We can help with this employer record, but sometimes it is just as beneficial to set up an entity and go that route as well. But making sure that the expectation of the worker is understood, what's expected of them, when are they supposed to be online, making sure that you're empathetic to their time zones and so on.
I find that very interesting, in particular, talking about Nigeria. You wouldn't think of it as the kind of first example that comes to mind, but I mean, I think I guess Africa is probably the symbol of inequality, maybe, if you think about the sort of economic outcomes of that continent. And so to be able to open up opportunity, this seems to be a very powerful thing to be doing as well. Switching gears slightly, we're kind of, I guess, in this topic is, not enough people to do the jobs, but then lots of the people who love these jobs don't get the opportunity. And that's an incredible mismatch, and we need to do something differently to think about this. And Gillian touched on it in her remarks, but I know you've been working on this as well, Charlotte, in your career. An important pool of people, which is growing, rapidly, are those who are not going to university. And of course, the costs are rising and the benefits maybe aren't so clear as they used to be. But a lot of employers aren't sure how to approach and how to kind of figure out this pool of talent. I'd love to get your general thoughts on, how we can think about getting more non-degree holders into tech, and then perhaps, a couple of best in practice examples that you might have seen.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're focusing on our kind of non-degree route. So taking, and that's not just focusing on school leavers, that's focusing on returners to work, coming off, mat leave, parental leave, long-term sick, everything. If you're in that category, if you don't have a degree, that goes up to kind of foundation, I think level 5 NVQ for apprenticeships, to give you some kind of clarity. And what we're trying to do is work out how much training those individuals would need within Wiley Edge, and ensuring that they will be set up for success. And also taking on board, there's a big mental health and well-being drive in that demographic as well. So how do we best support those individuals? We've recently ran and have a kind of case study on it with a large investment bank. They had a really challenging location. And we just said, look, why don't you just strip out degree criteria? It opens up a pool of people. We can do the training for longer. We will support them while they're on site. And they loved it. And we've got 30 on site at the moment, and they are flying. And because they're mixing with grads, they're mixing, and they're just seen, they're being paid the same. They are, they're in that level. And it's just, I think you and Blair on the other stage was talking about, that kind of learning. People learn differently, just in a classroom isn't good enough. You need to be in the office, seeing things, learning, etc. So I think that's what we're focusing on, as well as partnering with companies that are in routes with schools. We've partnered with a company recently called Your Game Plan. They're creating amazing stuff, bringing the industry into schools and making it relatable content. So, how does TikTok work? How does your PlayStation work? Things that kids can actually relate to from the age of kind of, 14 onwards, and then link it to a career route, and then also us advising of, if you want to do this, there's a uni route, there's your apprentice route, or there's, you know, other things like our world, which is we'll train you, we'll give you the industry knowledge, and then we're seeing them now as a result flying.
And in that example, are you seeing any performance difference? You know, any on-the-job outcome differences between those without a degree and those with in tech?
Not so much performance. I think there's a element on, and this is being brutally honest, professional skills. Something that we hadn't probably focused on enough, and now, you know, we're really ensuring that they're getting that, plus the kind of well-being, mental health side. But just, you know, what to say in the office, what not to discuss, you know, little things like that. And it's we're ironing out those kind of details, but it is, you know, you're working with a completely different demographic of people that haven't got life skills when you go to uni, away from parents, etc. So you haven't been exposed to those types of conversations.
Yeah, interesting point, and maybe that's life experience for people who are young and on the way up. Back to you, Maureen. I want to kind of just dig in a little bit on neurodiversity of all forms. We talked about it generally, and there's, you know, a great pool of untapped people. But what are, I mean, you're the expert on this. What are the what are some examples of or I'd love if you could share some incredible stories you've seen of people from a different background thriving in a business that might have changed the opinion of that business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so sometimes I get asked a lot, like when we're looking at the future of work, you know, what are the skill sets or the things that employers want? And I kind of try to change the question and say, well, I think employers maybe don't always know what they need. And, you know, they're focused on what they think they want, but, you know, the reality is things are changing fast. So much work in the future is going to be, even cognitive work is going to be replaced by algorithms, and it's more important than ever. Right, so like, you know, we need to be working with machines. We need to, you know, different types of thinking, creativity, nonlinear thinking, lateral thinking, types of skills that maybe were not valued as much in the past are going to be, in my opinion, more important to company in their future. And so, and I've seen examples like of neurodivergent people that maybe initially, you know, I helped place them in companies and they were recruited, and I felt like, unfortunately, it was more like let's tick the box, hey, we have neurodivergent people that work for us, but then they literally like saved that company because some of these individuals, I mean, they're just they're coming from problem solving from a different perspective. They have unique perceptual, cognitive, analytical skills. You don't want everybody to be correlated, and this is a concept I call neurodiversification, right? Like if you have everybody that's cognitively and perceptually correlated, it's a risk to your company, your organization, and a lot of the business failures throughout history, I think some of them could have been prevented if you had someone in the room there that either A, noticed those risks, or B, had, you know, either the courage or just were not as concerned about social status and more concerned about your company to actually speak up. And so you want, you know, you want people, especially even in leadership positions, you want people in the room that are going to have, you know, not only the organization, the best interest of the organization at heart, but unique skills, pattern matching skills, visual spatial skills, lateral thinking, nonlinear thinking, different ways of coming at, you know, maybe seeing things that other people don't see, and then being willing to risk their social status to say, hey, you know, maybe we should consider a different direction here. So I'm seeing something, you know, that could be disastrous, and maybe there's a better path forward.
Yeah, that chimes. That certainly rings a bell. And I mean, what we've been talking about in this session, I guess, are differences and why differences are positive, whether that's people from different countries, different, you know, ways of thinking, or different academic backgrounds, genders, races, incredibly important. I want to close off the conversation before we invite some questions. Nick, generally from your viewpoint, looking at the tech industry globally, interested in your comments on how you've seen maybe tech evolving in the enterprise. It seems to me tech's becoming quite core to everything that's happening, whereas before is maybe a vertical, an enabler or a support to enterprise. And, you know, how are you seeing that?
So I think you're right. I think tech used to be very siloed. I think we've come along a long way with developing SaaS technology. So, you have this interoperable set of systems with open APIs. If it's a SaaS software as well, it has upgrades to always keep relevant. What I think is really important now is the evolution of AI. I know that's been probably the biggest subject at this event this week. It is so important because it will automate a lot of the tasks that your employees are doing at the moment. So having a lot of that work, that administration taken care of, a lot of business intelligence as well. So that's the next thing, which is a data-driven organization. You will find that by 2025, and this is according to McKinsey, is everything you do within your organization is going to be based on real-time data coming in from across the business. So again, you have all your systems together, you have a data lake, you have excellent analytics, and everything that you do will be very much based around the data that you have at hand. So, to your question and to your point, it's no longer about siloed systems. It's about ensuring everything is joined up. And I'd say if you don't have AI as part of your strategy, then you need to do that ASAP.
Yeah. We've got a couple of minutes for any questions, thoughts, or reflections from the audience. We have a few hands up.
I'm afraid, Ashley, we're out of time.
Oh,
so I'm really sorry, but I know that the guys and the guys and gals are going to be around for networking afterwards, and they'll be able to take as many questions as you want to throw at them. Thank you very much. Thank you to Ashley, Charlotte, Maureen, and to Nick.